Trump's RICO prosecutor in the Atlanta case, D.A. Willis, formally moving to fast-track all of the 19 defendants in that racketeering case. So after the judge scheduled October 23rd for this gentleman you see in his mugshot, former Trump lawyer Ken Cheeseborough, the new motion basically pushes the judge to go past the leeway given to other co-defendants and apply basically those fast-track deadlines to everyone, asking the court to set aside that leeway for other defendants, saying those deadlines do not apply to other co-defendants. Now, if you want to translate that, it is legal speak for saying if the DA wins this effort, the fast deadlines would apply to everyone. That prospect has Trump's current lawyers concerned, which we know because just yesterday they were in federal court with Jack Smith, emphatically arguing that a fast trial would become an unfair show trial, insisting the events leading up to January 6th are complex and require years of preparation. And they were saying that about one federal coup case. Trump faces two related coup cases in these different jurisdictions, of course, and two other additional cases, two other trials. Now, this is a fact that also came up in court. So many pending criminal trials that these judges are now independently discussing scheduling the cascade of trials.
That's crazy.
So this was in that federal courtroom as Special Counsel Smith looked on. The federal judge said she already had conferred with the New York judge, saying, quote, I realize that Mr. Trump's criminal case in New York is scheduled for trial on March 25th. I did speak briefly with Judge Merchan, the New York judge, that is, to, quote, let him know that I was considering a date that might overlap with his trial. So the judge said March 4th, that's about 21 days before the planned New York trial. Now, you take it all together and you can see what's coming down the pike here between the trials and the primary calendar. There are many, many things facing this candidate defendant. There just aren't many wide open windows. So the defendant candidate will be facing a slew of...
Look at this, fam. March 4th, federal election interference trial. March 5th, Super Tuesday. March 25th, New York hush money trial. May 20th, federal classified documents trial. July 15th through the 18th, Republican National Convention. And then November 5th, 2024, election day. Sheesh, bro. 2024 is going to be crazy. Crazy. And I was seeing people in the comment section saying that they believe as well that this thing is going to be possibly televised. Bro, this is going to get insane next year.
Trials, debates, and primaries. The federal coup trial is on track to begin one day before Super Tuesday. And the precedents that we have and the reporting available suggest defendant Trump would, under the normal rules, have to be present in person for his criminal trials, some of which could clearly stretch weeks at a time.
Now, this is saying Trump's trial run, how an onslaught of court dates could sideline him from the campaign trail. I think that judge made it pretty clear when she stated, this is no different than somebody having a job or an athlete or anything. She referenced multiple things, bro. You would have to figure it out. And I was like, she's already, like I said before, drawing that line in the sand. He or she, I'm not sure who the judge is. He or she, my bad. But they're drawing that line in the sand to say, that's not going to work. That's not going to be tolerated. And you won't be using that for an excuse. So.
Politico put it. As for the fairness to this defendant, the federal judge also addressed these Trump lawyers' claims that the plan here is, quote, too fast to be fair. That's kind of what they were arguing, the show trial thing. Well, here's what the judge said. A trial start date of March 4th gives Mr. Trump 7 months between indictment and trial, which I believe is sufficient time to advise with counsel and prepare his defense. If you think about where we started, in 2016, the start of this sort of Trump era in government. In 2020, after he lost and then was linked to this insurrection and all the questions about accountability with that, to now, just these past few months, it really is reversing. And sometimes we struggle in life, in media and news, in narrative, to adjust our premises and our lens and our narrative. The old narrative was He and they are getting away with everything. Well, something else seems to be happening here. And if you look at the mounting cries and protestations and objections, quite literally, of these Trump lawyers, you can see that they're not pretending otherwise. Their client may post and lie and bluster, but they understand these trials are scheduled. Some of them are clearly scheduled to land before the election. Some of them carry stiff jail time if convicted, and some of them are in places with facts and evidence that this defendant may find becomes a barrier not only to the White House, but to his own very liberty.
Do y'all think he will be convicted? I think that's the question that I've been asking myself. Do y'all think he's actually gonna get convicted? I didn't even actually think we would make it this far, to be honest with you. I didn't see none of this coming or happening. So I was sitting down last night and I was just sitting there and I was like, do you think we will actually see this take place?
I want to bring in New York Times Magazine legal writer Emily Bazelon. Welcome back. Your thoughts on these speedy trials, all the above?
Well, it just seems as if there are all these planes that are lining up on the runway and they are trying to take off, and there are all these competing considerations. Trump obviously has an interest in delaying this as much as possible. For one thing, if he's elected president, he could try to make the federal charges go away. And also, being under indictment is maybe not an asset with the voters, but actually having to go to trial, having these facts in the news every day is really not going to help him and will be an enormous distraction from campaigning. And so that's the dynamic. You have judges who want to move ahead. You have other defendants asking to move ahead very quickly with a trial date this October in a couple of cases. And then you have former President Trump trying to delay as much as he can.
Yeah. And then in Georgia, you see just how quickly things shift. Mark Meadows didn't just spend all that time and energy trying to duck the Jan 6 committee. He risked a lot of trouble over it. He was held in contempt. For those, and we've reminded folks, there were 4 people that faced those kind of contempt resolutions from the Congress. 2 were indicted, Navarro and Bannon. The other 2, Meadows and Scavino, were not, although he took that risk. As you know, Emily, and I want to remind viewers, all of that was about him basically saying 2 things. 1, he just didn't want to talk about it, which might be self-interest. And 2, at times claiming he couldn't talk about it, that there were legal bars to that. Well, all that went up in smoke. He talked about it in open court for 5 hours. And there may be aspects or parts of it he didn't get into, in all fairness. But he certainly could have taken that same approach with the Jan 6 committee. It took until yesterday. I want to read from some of his defense, which we now have for the first time, right? We didn't have that before. He talks about being on that infamous call with the Georgia elections official and says that it was really about trying to find a, quote, less litigious resolution of the Trump campaign's then pending lawsuit against the state. What do you think of this sudden change in his willingness or ability to testify?
One of the things the legal process does is push people to speak the truth and to explain themselves because they're facing really serious consequences. And so I think what you're seeing here with Mark Meadows is that the incentives have realigned. Now he's trying to argue that he should be tried or his case should be heard in federal court because what he was doing were part of his official government duties, and that would give him the right to remove the case to federal court. There's a complicated question about whether if a judge rules in his favor on moving to federal court, that pulls all of the other 18 defendants in the Georgia case with Mr. Meadows into federal court. That's a really tricky issue. Meadows is trying to do the best he can because I think he thinks that will be a better jury pool for him and just a better venue. So one would think that these questions about whether he was pursuing his official duty or not, these are tricky issues. However, in trying to prove that's what he was doing, he provided a lot of details about these calls, about his involvement in them, and it's a sort of side effect of the more procedurally, the procedural aspects of the case that we're learning more about the substance.
All eyes are on Trump's criminal cases in Washington, where Jack Smith was back in court today. In fact, seated in the front row, scoring a victory on procedure and timing, as well as all eyes on, well, Atlanta, where indicted Trump White House veteran Mark Meadows took the stand this very afternoon, making his bid to move that trial for him out of the state court system. Indeed, those two big hearings came as another January 6th case also held a hearing in the federal courthouse in Washington today. Trump White House veteran Peter Navarro. Now, that's a lot going down in one day. Both Navarro's hearing and the Jack Smith hearing took place in the exact same courthouse where defendant Trump was arraigned. And we have more on the Navarro news later this hour. The hearing in special counsel Smith case, well, that ended with some news. The judge rebuffing defendant Trump's hope for a 2026 trial and ruling on a fast schedule. The trial date is now set. This is the first time we're reporting this. March 4th, 2024, a win for Jack Smith's team. It's within about 2 months of their request. It came after a top Smith prosecutor told the court today that the defendant, formerly the senior most official in our federal government, is accused of historic crimes. And thus, there's an incredibly strong public interest in a jury's prompt and full consideration of those claims in open court. And the judge said trial dates do not and never, quote, depend on a defendant's professional obligations. Mr. Trump will have to make the date work regardless of his schedule. She also added that a trial for, say, a professional athlete, in that case, it would be...
See, this is what I was talking about right here, where she compared it to an athlete or anybody else. So she's trying to make him, and his statue of being a previous president, she's trying to make him like everybody else. I hate to use the word mortal or human or anything like that. Just trying to, you know what I mean? Make it seem like you don't get special privileges because you're Trump and you're running for president and you were a previous president. So she's really, like I said again, drawing her line in the sand.
Inappropriate to schedule a trial date to accommodate her schedule. The same is true here. Our defendant Trump is also a candidate with an eye on January voting and Super Tuesday in March. This trial process now begins with jury selection one day before that key date on his professional calendar, to use the judge's language. And tonight we're reporting from Washington, given all of these developments. In fact, I attended today's hearing along with other reporters and lawyers, including DOJ veteran Glenn Kirshner. And here's a quick part of our reaction. This was just a few hours ago as we walked out of that courtroom immediately after the hearing.
We have a March 4th trial date, 2024. Judge Chutkan made it clear that jury selection will start on that day. Needless to say, the defense counsel, the defense team, was not happy with that.
But that was significantly earlier than the Trump's team wanted.
And it's interesting, Ari, because Judge Chutkan kept pushing the defense team to give her something, give her a counter proposal to the April 2026 trial date that they had proposed, because she said that's not going to happen. The defense stood its ground. They refused to give any kind of a counter proposal. Now they got what they got, which is a speedy trial.
So again, that means Trump trial is set to be one day before Super Tuesday, and the headlines already...
I don't think that, because we were hearing reports about them wanting to do 2 years or whatever, however long they wanted, how many years they wanted to do. So them not having a counter proposal seems a bit odd to me. You know what I mean? Or maybe I'm hearing this wrong and not processing right, because you would make that sort of mistake. I believe Trump would have fired you quick as I don't know what, bro. You know what I mean? This is not the trial for you to make small little rudimentary mistakes. No. He needs the best of the best, top of the top to do this. And that type of mistake right there. So that's why I'm kind of like, no. I was hearing other reports of them saying they wanted a couple of years, and they were saying some other things to go along with that. So to say they weren't prepared, or didn't have any type of retort for the date that she was throwing out doesn't sound right to me.
So again, that means Trump trial is set to be one day before Super Tuesday, and the headlines already coming in, smack dab in the middle of what will be the scheduled primary season. Now, back in court, this hearing also featured some clashes which may show where this case is headed. So I'm going to walk through this right now with you. Donald Trump's lead defense attorney, John Lauro, gave such a fiery set of remarks today that the judge told him to actually, quote, lower the temperature at one point. And he provided some sweeping rhetoric at times. He said, quote, Trump is not above the law, but he's not below the law either, and argued that special counsel Jack Smith's schedule would be a show trial, not a speedy trial. And beyond the trial date, Lauro previewed a roadmap of attacks that he says should get the case tossed, previewing motions to argue that the court may not even have jurisdiction over this case because DOJ has essentially indicted President Trump for being President Trump and faithfully executing the laws. The defense lawyer arguing, we're going to have a very unique and extensive motion that deals with executive immunity. Now, this was important here because what we're showing you is basically what they're going to do in defense of Donald Trump in this coup case. And what we witnessed today is one of the most significant times a Trump lawyer has taken Donald Trump's many and fairly well-known attacks on the Bidens, on President Biden's link to Merrick Garland, who he did appoint, and tried to fuse this today into kind of a legal strategy. Lauro noting that the DOJ is overseen by President Biden and even citing the Hunter Biden controversies. He's previewing in court today a, quote, selective prosecution motion because this prosecution provides an advantage to these prosecutors' boss who's running a political campaign against President Trump, Lauro told the judge, and added the motion will go directly to the core of the criticisms that Mr. Trump made historically against President Biden and his son, and whether or not this, meaning the Jack Smith prosecution, is a, quote, retaliatory action as a result of that. Now, let me tell you, you don't hear that every day in what is a trial scheduling hearing. But this is important, and I want to walk through it with you because we learned a lot in this hearing today. These defense lawyers have every right to challenge the prosecutor's approach or potential fairness and to make arguments which invoke defendant Trump's status as a former president and a current candidate. They may argue that that is relevant. But today, it's also worth noting that the more sweeping arguments by Trump's lawyers fell flat with the judge.
I don't think it fell flat, but what do y'all think about that game plan, though, to attack Hunter Biden? I think it's pretty smart strategy-wise. I think that's pretty smart. He has been in the news a whole lot. We'll probably get into a few videos on what's going on with all of that and everything like that. But that's smart, in my opinion, to attack someone whose credibility is just horrible and has just been slandered all through the media and everything like that. So to attack him and say this is retaliatory because of my remarks to him, I think is pretty genius on the defense side. Not saying it will work. Not saying that, you know what I mean? We don't know how this stuff is going to play out. It's all speculatory right now, but I just think that's a pretty good, and I know that's not going to be their only, but I think that's a pretty smart way to go defense-wise. We'll see how it plays out, though.
I'm not saying that as an opinion or a prediction. I'm just telling you what actually happened because today we saw the rubber hit the road. That same lawyer claimed any trial before 2026 would become a, quote, show trial. And that's an argument you can make. But it failed because they lost. And the trial, as of today, we're reporting, is scheduled for March 24. And that goes to something larger here. Hearings like this, as we move past the arraignment stage, they will matter to how these trials proceed. Today's hearing and its ruling really against what the Trump team wanted is a clear reminder this forum is not Twitter. It's not a political arena. It's not some primary debate that this defendant or candidate can skip on some whim. This is a binding forum where, as Trump's own lawyer said in court today, the defendant's liberty and life is at stake. It is a forum where lawyers can say words like President Biden's son or selective prosecution or witch hunt. They can say those words, but there are rules for when those claims can even be presented to the jury, let alone weighed or considered credible evidence. As the hearing continued, it looked like Special Counsel Smith would get most of the timeline that his team requested. He really sat pretty silently in the front row as he has at other court proceedings and Trump's arraignments. We have some of those past sketches up on the screen right now. I could tell you, because we were down there reporting as I showed you, I was seated about 7 feet behind Jack Smith. He sat sternly and fairly emotionless in the front row, a notebook in his lap at times. Indeed, the only time when Smith appeared to register any reaction was when he nodded in agreement as the judge said that defendant Trump has broad rights to receive helpful evidence in his defense from the DOJ to what they call exculpatory material. Otherwise, Mr. Smith revealed almost nothing. Now, that level of restraint is not a legal requirement. We have seen prosecutors and special counsels speak more or emote more, still within the rules. But this is how Jack Smith has long approached his work. He doesn't emote much. He doesn't take questions in public. And if there is any speaking to do, well, he gathers the evidence and tends to file a speaking indictment. Today, we witnessed one of the first momentous hearings since that speaking indictment, where the federal government that Trump once ran presented him as a defendant in a case over staging a coup to overthrow that government's democracy. Even when we watch these various proceedings and bookings and arraignments, it's still kind of surreal when we say out loud what this is. And that is what this is. The defendant is presumed.
I've been saying that for the longest, bro. All of this is surreal. You cut the TV on, you turn on the news and see it happening. You're just instantly like, wow, we're actually this is actually taking place right now. We're witnessing it live. And it's like, wow. And you feel good about, what's going on and people being tried, people being innocent till proven guilty, an actual trial taking place, a person being heard, a person prosecuting, a person defending, you got a jury. You know what I mean? You're actually seeing our system take place. And whether you like it or not, it'll be exposed to the world to see how corrupt this system is. I think that's a huge key component as well that people will be watching, because how this plays out determines how our system will be viewed for a long, long time.
The innocent, the defendant has rights, but the defendant lost a round today to try to kick this thing down the road.